welcome to my TED Talk. I'm Saani Awan, and my TED Talk is about how you eat, what you eat, where it comes from, and what you can do to eat better. So let me ask our crowd here today, who here has had instant noodles before? Okay, who here has had fresh produce pulled from the ground? Who here has had meat that was just butchered? All right. Have you ever wondered where your food came from? Have you ever wondered what the quality of your food was? And have you ever wondered if it could be produced in a more sustainable way? In my opinion, food is the number one priority of all people. It trumps everything else. Because without food, you wouldn't have the energy to do any other thing. So what is your food? First, let's talk about what is on your food, or what goes into producing it, making it better or making it faster. Insecticides are put onto your food during its growth so that it won't be pillaged by insects and so that the harvest will be more plentiful. However, this has tons of side effects and can really ruin your health. This is mitigated by PGR, plant growth regulations. What they do is each country is different and each country has certain regulations and rules so that your food comes to you without any harmful side effects. They do this and people use these plant growth regulating hormones and whatnot so that there's less waste product. So when farmers are planting all their crops, they plant annuals so that they can have a very large output. This causes the soil to become extremely dry. This causes environments to become arid, and this causes the quality of your food to significantly decrease because the nutrients in the soil are non-existent. So what are the worst agricultural systems? The four criteria are soil depletion, food insecurity, desertification, and water scarcity. Soil depletion is when somebody plants something, whether they plant it too often, or they plant it too much, or they plant it in a bad way, so that the food takes all the nutrients out, and because they keep cycling this over and over and over again, the soil cannot replenish itself. Farmers typically do cycles where they plant 1 or 2 crops, don't plant them for a few years, and then plant them after those 2 years or 3 years or maybe even 6 years are up. This causes the soil to regain nutrients that were lost during that cycle. However, most farmers don't do this anymore because the crops that they're planting, such as corn or soy or wheat, like they do in Alberta, not only grow fast, but they grow in such a high demand. So instead of planting it when they should, they plant it too often, and this causes the soil to become horrible. This causes food insecurity because when you have poor crop, then you need to add tons of fertilizer to your soil so that you can actually grow something viable. Food insecurity is also led by countries that are big producers such as the Asia or South America. They produce all this food, but the majority of their intent is to export this food. So these export economies are leading to food insecurity because they produce a surplus, and then the food that is not as nice looking, or maybe there's some deformity with it, let's say, well, they don't sell that, and then that's tons of food waste, and then they plant in the same cycles. Desertification is currently happening rapidly in Asia and Africa. For example, the Sahel Desert is creeping down into Africa. This is because of these same techniques of farmers. They plant in such a way that the soil becomes so bad that the desert starts to expand. This is a huge problem, not only because it reduces viable farmland, but because it's driving people out of their homes because they can't use that land anymore. And this leads to water insecurity. When you pump fertilizers into your food, when you add in all these hormones, when you don't properly take care of the land, there's so much more water that you need to use because, of course, you can't plant anything without water. And And because the soil is so arid and dry, it requires more and more water. This is especially bad because we are currently having a water shortage in the world of fresh water that we can use. This also aids corporations in privatizing water. When these farmers have to abandon their land because of desertification or because they're being exploited, this leads to urbanization, which further continues the cycle of discontent and bad food because all those farmers move into cities where they try to get better jobs. However, they don't get them. Or if they start out, it's not in the best of situations. So they have to create these communities where there's a whole bunch of poverty. And as we know, poverty is extremely difficult to get out of. Now, because they're in poverty, they have to buy food that is cheap, and food that is cheap typically isn't all that good for you. This increases the amount of obesity rates that we've seen in the world. This increases the rates of heart disease and also puts horrible burdens on the bodies of children who need to have food that they can eat and benefit them, but instead are having to eat food that is not at all good for them and packed with things that will really only damage their systems. Additionally, this leads to a great loss of human life because of dangerous migration practices. So, food supply chain, where is your food coming from? Canada spent $681.5 billion worth of food imports in 2022 alone. Because of our cold climate, we don't actually invest into a lot of technologies that can help us grow our own food. So we spend an almost outrageous amount of money on getting that food, especially during the winter months. That makes us the 6th largest importer of food and seafood in the world. And it makes us the 5th largest exporter, and that is mostly wheat. So really, that means 50 to 60% of Canadian food is imported. That means 50 to 60% of the food you eat is imported. Now you can only imagine how much bruising, how many chemicals, how much wax is put onto that food during the transportation. Of course, there are regulations. There are coolers that you can put them in, and you can do all these things, but you never really know what happens to your food, whether it's on a voyage or if it's on a plane. And really, it's a huge industry, but 70% of food that's domestically produced is consumed by Canadians. You have to wonder where that other 30% is going. Food that's produced at home is the best because it's fresh. And really, that's something that we've lost in today's world. We don't have the same quality of food that we did before, and really it's difficult to access that food, which is a huge problem. Economic exploitation is one of the worst outcomes of our current agricultural and trade system regarding food. Companies like Monsanto, these monopolies exploit, abuse, and treat very harshly the people who produce our food. You may recall the farmers' protest in India is an example of this. Cash crops are probably the bane of our world right now. By producing things at an unsustainable rate, at an unsustainable way, our world is becoming more and more dry, and there's nothing actually being done on this front to stop the problem. But who is doing it right? Answer, in my opinion, is Singapore. Singapore invests into technologies, biotechnologies, that are able to reduce the strain on our world. And they do this partially because they have very little land, which is what drives them to invest and take a people-first approach in their food. Currently, they produce 10% of their food by these technologies, and they hope to increase this to 30% so that they have domestically produced food. Another benefit of this is maximizing space and resources. If you plant a garden on a rooftop, not only do you maximize that space, but now you have food that you can eat. These systems are also amazing because systems like vertical farming, which is one of these biotechnologies, actually reuses 95% of the water put into the system. Additionally, don't use insecticides, herbicides, or fungicides, keeping your food safe. And here's an example of what Singapore did. Because they wanted to reduce food waste, they produced exactly how much food they needed, and they genetically modified that food to the taste of the citizens so that less food was wasted. This is absolutely phenomenal, and this is a technology that is probably the future of our world. It's changing how we look at food, the quality of our food, and the transportation of our food. Singapore is already saving billions of dollars because they don't have to import all of their food. So, what are some practical uses that we've already seen? Well, here's a school. I know in Ann Anderson they have vertical farming technology. Imagine if our cafeteria was able to produce its own food, its own lettuces, tomatoes, strawberries. Imagine how much better that would taste. Imagine how much money we could save as a school. But also, doesn't this teach us about accountability and responsibility? When you're feeding someone, shouldn't you feed them what you think is the best product? Restaurants are doing that. High-end restaurants around the world are using vertical farming to produce leafy greens so that their customers have the freshest produce possible, straight from their kitchen. Here's a prison in Portugal. Prisoners are using vertical farming to produce their own food. This is a great way to rehabilitate prisoners and release them back into society. This is a great way to teach accountability, teach healing. There are real-world improvements that are happening right now, such as the Billion Oyster Project, which releases tons of oysters into New York Harbor so that they can clean it out using natural methods. This is called bioremediation. Here is the Caledonian Forest of the Scottish Highlands. It was razed down by the British, and now they're replanting the entire thing. They're saving lost species, and they're bringing back the animals that used to live there. Here are some rings in Senegal. The UN World Food Programme went into Senegal and other African countries to stop the spread of the Sahel Desert. They've not only reunited families, kept people from starving, but they've reinvigorated the people there so that they want to continue living there instead of moving away and losing their culture. Then there's boats and companies that are cleaning out oceans, cleaning out rivers and cleaning out streams, doing their best to remove all the plastic that's in our water. There are so many ways that we can help our world, and one of those ways that we should focus on is where is our food coming from? You may not realize it, you may not even think about it, but there's more ways to fight than by being an activist, going out or protesting somewhere. If you think about little things, very little things, the seed of progress can bloom in any field, and there are systems in place to make